Hey, good morning, everybody. The beginning of the recording is my cue to start for the day. My name is James Dickinson. I'll be facilitating through the day. Just a quick introduction of myself. This is last year was my 25th fire season. Started in 2000 as a seasonal with the Forest Service, and then bounced around to various places, including obviously from technician to management to research, and then into regional positions, and then recently, about 3 years ago, transitioned over to BLM, where I'm Assistant State Fire Management Officer, and been kind of, you know, supervising the integration side of the fuel or the fire program, I should say, and happy to be here participating with you guys. And I did join the planning committee for this group just about a month and a half before class. So just kind of sitting in, getting a feel for how all this plays out, but enjoying seeing the opportunity to shape new FMOs as well as agency administrators. So with that, we've got a full agenda for the day, and our first speaker today is Jill Jones, talk about dispatch and mobilization, and I'll go ahead and kick it off to her.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just gonna share my screen here. Are you seeing it?
Got it, Jill.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so my name is Jill Jones. I work for the Department of Natural Resources. I am the Communication Systems Manager for East Side of Washington State. And prior to that, I was the Dispatch Center Manager at the Northeast Washington Interagency Coordination Center. I did that for 8 years. Prior to that, I did 8 years in Newark as the Operations Coordinator. And then I actually started my career with the Department of Natural Resources in 1988 as an initial attack dispatcher. Dispatch very near and dear to my heart. I still hold my dispatch qualifications, although I moved into the radio world. So we'll get going on this. Get here. All right. So our objective today, we're going to identify policies guiding national, geographic, and local mobilization through the National Dispatch System. We're going to describe the role and function of the National Multi-Agency Coordinating Group, NMAC. Geographic Area Multi-Agency Coordinating Groups, GMAC, and then local multi-agency coordination groups, MAC. We're going to discuss the role of local line officers and agency administrators specifically as it relates to the geographic MAC groups. So that sounds like a snoozer, right? A little bit, but I assure you I'm going to add some more goodies because dispatch is a pretty big thing to cover in 1 hour. So we'll start off with the 3 tiers of dispatch. At the top of the tier is NIC, that is the National Interagency Coordination Center. It is located in Boise. There's just one. And then below that are 10 geographic coordination centers. Those would be like for us in the Northwest is the Northwest Coordination Center at Portland. And then lower than that, and I shouldn't say lower, but the local dispatch centers. So we refer to them as tier 3 dispatch centers. Those are the ones predominantly with initial attack responsibilities and local support to the firefighters on the ground. So I'm kind of briefly go through ordering procedures, kind of how this works in the coordination system. Essentially, a fire starts. The dispatch center starts an incident in their CAD system, and we use a lot of different CAD systems in the national dispatch centers. But that is tied to Irwin, and I'll go into a little more details. But essentially, the incident is created at the local tier 3 dispatch center, and then from that, thank you, Eric. They're going to send an order up to the Geographic Area Coordination Center. And I'm just going to give you an example. So for a local incident, there's a need for a division supervisor. We do not have one in our local area. So we're going to send that order up for us, for Northeast Washington. We're going to send that up to Portland. they're going to get that order for a division supervisor. And in the Geographic Area Coordination Center, what they're going to try to do is try to fill that within the Northwest. So we want to keep, costs low. We want to keep travel times down. So if Oregon has something, they're going to, send it up to Northeast Washington. That's an example. So say the Northwest doesn't have any, they're going to send that order up to the National Interagency Coordination Center. At that point, Nick is going to look back down into their geographic areas and see who has a division supervisor. And I'm really simplifying this process, but say Northern Rockies has a division supervisor. They're going to send that order to Northern Rockies. And from there, Northern Rockies is going to say, oh, look, Coeur d'Alene has one off the Panhandle. They're going to send that division supervisor order to Coeur d'Alene Dispatch Center, and they're going to fill that order and send the person to our fire. So that's really simplified, but that's kind of how it works. To do this, we use a system called IROC, Interagency Resource Capability, or Ordering Capability. And this replaced what we lovingly recall called ROS. Some people still refer to it as ROS, but so if you see ROS, they're meaning the IROC system. Essentially, this is the system we use in the coordination framework to move resources, track resources, demob resources. You can see what's still assigned. You can track assignment history. You can see where orders are. It's very transparent. If I, from Northeast Washington, want to see where my division supervisor order is sitting, I can easily go in and see that it's sitting at Coeur d'Alene Dispatch. So it really has, I mean, I've been in dispatch since 1988. It's really made dispatching much more efficient than the old, faxing a hard cart. I'll just go back in time here. The other thing about IROC is it's tied to our CAD system, to the computer aided dispatch system. So once an incident is created in CAD, it is actually created as well in IROC. And then from there, you can build those orders for the things that you need. It's also through Irwin tied to IQS, IQCS. It's tied to EI Suite. So through Irwin, there's this push of information that also tracks other things. And I'll get into that a little more detailed. But it's essentially the authority to mobilize to an incident. And everybody needs one when they're going to an interagency type fire. And every time you move a helicopter, they have to have an IROC order. Every time you, move a crew, there's an IROC order. We'll kind of get into that. But it's especially helpful because it provides that documentation for trespass or cost recovery. And I know that's going to be covered tomorrow. And then also cost tracking, cost shares, any sort of litigation. When we're going to court, we have to provide these documents showing, this is what was assigned to the incident, as an example. This is just one screen of an example of what IROC looks like. This is just an example of an orders that are pending. I searched it by request number. So there's A's for aviation or aircraft, C's for crews. So there's functional areas in here. And I just wanted to demonstrate that it's a pretty complex system with a lot of different screens, and dispatchers have to be pretty dialed on where to look for different things. And again, it's used at all tiers of the dispatch center. Even when your preparedness, severity, everything is, going through IROC. Let me go back to local policy. So local policy is really to coordinate and mobilize and demob of the resources locally between your local, federal, land management agencies, state agencies, and cooperators. And those are done through the multitude of operating plans that we've kind of talked about. There's different plans and dispatch procedures that are set up per local policy. Essentially, it provides for safe, efficient, and effective support to incident operations within a defined dispatch area location. And then when extended attack has really exceeded that local capability, then we start that process of moving those resource requests up through the geographic coordination center. And there are some exceptions to this. There are a lot of state-to-state agreements out there, like Washington State DNR may have a direct agreement with Idaho Department of Lands, as an example. There's also the Northwest Compact Orders. So a lot of times we'll move resources between state agencies or other governments that, we're moving those resources through those compact orders. And then the other caveat to that is for Washington State DNR, we may not send an order for additional resources up to Portland. We may send it to Olympia, which is our state headquarters, to mobilize state DNR engines. So if we need a strike team of engines, we might not even send it up to the GAC. We'll send it up to Olympia, and they will fill that order with DNR engines. So within our own agency, we do have ability to move resources around. Again, done through IROC with a resource order. And for the most part, we really do, even if they're state to state or compact orders, we really still try to run things up through the GAC, especially at higher preparedness levels. So they have that situational awareness of resources mobilizing or demobbing or moving around. This slide just shows a little YA fire, like, nothing really. There's this is a quick little fire, but what I wanted to show this as is a demonstrated example. So for this, they ordered aircraft. They ordered a Fireboss, and we didn't have one at Deer Park. So what we did was we went to Coeur d'Alene Dispatch, and it's across a GAC line. But we have an agreement between a 5-party agreement for resource sharing across that GAC line. So Coeur d'Alene Dispatch is in the Northern Rockies GAC, and Northeast Washington is in the Northwest GAC. But we do have ability to move resources for initial attack specifically across those GAC boundaries without moving that order all the way up to Portland, up to Boise, back down to Northern Rockies, and then back to Coeur d'Alene. So really what this is about is efficient movement of resources to grab this fire and suppress this fire quickly. This also keeps our costs lower, and we're all trying to leverage what we have. So just wanted to show that quick example. So move into geographic area policy. So the Geographic Coordination Center really provides the cost-effective mobilization and demob resources between the National Interagency Coordination Center, so NIC, the NIC, Northwest Federal Land Management Agencies, state agencies, and cooperators, according to their agency organizational practices. Now, there may be a time that DNR is like, we're not willing to send resources. We have a mandated responsibility to keep stuff, so we may not send resources out. So again, it's by their agency organizational practices. But that's kind of what the GAC does. So they're really coordinating that response to wildfire incidents or all hazard incidents under that national response framework and the authorities. Another really important thing with the GAC is that they supply a lot of predictive services information to the local dispatch centers. They're that conduit between NIC, what's going on nationally, and other GACs to those local dispatch centers. So they have a situational awareness of what's going on in other areas and can kind of gauge like where are we going to get resources if the Southwest monsoon hasn't moved in. Okay, so where are we going to get our resources, right? And understand that. They provide weather predictive services. So they're really the place where we go. Local dispatch centers generally do not call the NIC. They go to their GAC first. We also have a subject matter expert in our class today. It's the Deputy Center Manager for NWC. So Jeff is here. If I mess anything up, I'm hoping he speaks up, but I'm trying to do the coordination system from all encompassing. So resource mobilization. So there's certain overhead positions, cash items, and things that go directly to the GAC. Fireline explosive teams, any of the radio systems are going to go up to the GAC. Frequencies is another thing that we send up to the GAC. Again, as mentioned, everything has an IROC order. So even every frequency that we're ordering has a resource order. And then, you know, they're allocating resources within that geographic area. We do follow neighborhood policy, and I'll kind of get into that. So when we're in, especially in PL level 1 through 3, we really don't want to you know, weight that system down, sending orders up to the GAC if we can go to our neighbors. So for, as an example, at Newark, one of our neighbors is the Mount Tolman and the Cobble reservation. So we may need like an engine, we could send a resource order directly to them without going all the way up to NWC and having them send it back down. So again, there's a resource order, but we do really try to leverage that interagency cooperation in Washington State and even Idaho as my example, moving those resources as quickly as possible and without belaboring you know, the folks at NWC for those movements. At preparedness level 3, generally the neighborhood policy is suspended. We really can't just go directly to a neighboring dispatch center sending an order directly. And it's really just because of the competition and prioritization of resources. When that drawdown is there and resources, you know, really become thin, we need to be keeping a pulse on that and not just dispatch centers going to their neighbors saying, hey, look, can you just send me this? So we really shut that down. So moving into the national policy, NICS roles. So really with conjunction with the GACs and in an alignment with NMAC direction, and we'll get into like the MAC groups here in a bit, they're really are allocating the resources to meet existing and anticipated needs. So if there's something out there, like we're getting a wind event or we're going to get a substantial lightning coming into the Northwest, you know, NICS also dialed into that. Okay, what are we going to mobilize up to the Northwest? So those communications are happening and they're allocating resources to meet those anticipated needs. Again, IROC order on a preposition. So everybody has an IROC order. Even if we're prepoing up a CIMT in the Northwest, those folks all have a resource order. So there are national resources. These are listed in the MOB guides, et cetera. Typically high demand. VLATs, one of them, the very large air tankers, smoke jumpers, hotshot crews. And, you know, there's some unique reporting responsibilities and requirements, but a couple of the others, and I have a lot of acronyms in here, but the MAFs, so move here really quick. Sorry. Modular airborne firefighting system. So this is when the military C-130s put in a system to essentially spray retardant, right? So we start standing those up. Aerial supervision modules, lead planes. So again, these are high demand, not a lot of resources. These are national resources. So those would all go up to NIC. When there's an order for a VLAT or a large air tanker, we're going to place that order up to the GAC, and then they're going to place that order up to NIC. Okay.
Hey, Jill, you have a question in the chat.
Neighborhood policy when referring to borrowing other resources. Do you mean other units, agencies under the dispatch or crossing dispatch boundaries? That's a good question. So it really depends on the dispatch center. If you're a tier, I'm going to call it a tier 4, so a local dispatch center. So DNR has West Side dispatch centers that are standalone DNR dispatch centers. They don't have any ability to move resources other than those they're responsible for. So if they needed something out of CCC, the Columbia Cascade Center, they are going to actually have to send an order. And so the neighborhood policy is actually, it's built into our IROC. You cannot send an order outside your neighbors that are defined in IROC. I hope that answers it. But within NEWIC, so it's an interagency dispatch center, we use them across the board. It's closest forces. So we will send a BLM engine to a DNR fire all day, every day, if that's the closest, right? So within that dispatch center, and those are based on the authorities in the delegation to the center manager. So those are made very clear in the dispatch procedures and in mobilization guides. So yeah, hopefully I answered that. I'm going to talk a little bit about unable to fill. We call it UTF. So there's a 48-hour unable to fill policies that exist nationally. What this does is we really don't want orders lounging in a dispatch center or sitting there in at NIC or at NWC or at any other GAC. We want to get those orders filled, get people mobilizing to an incident. And so when I went through kind of the ordering procedure, an order goes up to NIC. If we haven't heard anything in 48 hours and NIC is still getting that unable to fill, they're going to send that back to the ordering dispatch center. At that point, once NIC has touched that order, it's dead. And so it cannot be sent back up through the system. A new order has to be created. And so what that really entails is getting back with the ordering manager on the team or the incident commander, whoever's doing the ordering for that fire, and saying, okay, your 3 division supervisors got UTF'd. Are they still critical needs? We're going to need to put out a new date and time needed. So on date and time needed, we recognize in dispatch through all the systems that it's now. We need these people now, right? We get it. But especially during initial attack. But we also know that we need to have time to mobilize. We need to have time to fill the order for the folks to pack their bags, to get on the plane, to do all the things that are around mobilizing. So we put out a new date and time. We'll put in a new division supervisor order as my example, and send that back up through with a new date and time needed. So again, that goes through that whole cycle of NIC sending those orders to other GACs, looking for that resource to start mobilizing. And I didn't mention, if there are questions, I am trying to watch the chat as well. I got multiple screens, but please feel free, raise your hand, throw it in the chat. And Eric, thank you again for adding our acronyms. I know we're riddled with them. So we're going to get into multi-agency coordination and what that is. So it's really about having the partnerships, cooperation in place that really support this whole system of integrated responsibility and authority, and coordinating the resources to support the boots on the ground, just to suppress the incident or all risk. It could be an all risk hazard. So we want to, work together as a team. And I've been with the DNR for 37, 38 years, whatever. And so it was definitely new in moving into an interagency dispatch center and understanding what multi-agency coordination meant, what it did. And it's fascinating, and it's really it's really near and dear to my heart. I really love the aspect of this, and I'll get into a little bit more here. So why do we have multi-agency coordination? Really, it's to provide the emergency management, again, primarily wildland fire and under the Stafford Act, by setting priorities and allocating resources through coordination with affected agencies. Just a quick little significant wildland fire potential outlook for August of 2023. Like, it always looks like this, right? It's always red up in the Northwest. But you know, that multi-agency coordination has to look at all the red in the whole nation at that national level. Where is the significant potential? And then they start making priorities and allocating resources. So this is an example of NMAC, the National MAC Group correspondence. It is very transparent in what this group is very transparent in what its priorities are nationally. Like they set these priorities every year. This is what it's going to look like, regardless of agency and affiliation. This is what our national priorities are. And this is the beauty of the coordination system. So in setting national priorities and drawdowns, the following criteria will be considered: protecting communities and community infrastructure. So they're going right into communities and community infrastructure and people and lives, right? So that's kind of, you know, they're setting the framework for how they're going to allocate resources. So NMAC, who's all involved in NMAC at the national level? BIA, BLM, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, and generally their roles and responsibilities are from their organization. So they have the authority. So the Fire Operations Director from the BIA at the national level has the authority to speak for his agency on and make decisions in that capacity. And so again, it's mostly directors, and then the states are represented through the National Association of State Foresters, because imagine 52 state foresters in there. So there's one representative that represents the states. And again, it's tied to their authorities to make decisions about resource allocation and their priorities. What their mission is, again, I kind of talked about this if in their correspondence, they're establishing that national priority among the GACs, okay? They're directing and allocating and reallocating resources throughout the GACs, and they're giving that direction to Nick. So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. The NMAC provides that to Nick, and Nick starts moving resources according to those directions. And then, you know, anticipating future emergency management needs, they're the ones that would start the activation of international resources and the military at the national level. And again, not inclusive. They have a whole bunch of things that they're responsible for. Then we get further down, we're whittling down here to the geographic areas. So the geographic MAC, we say Northwest MAC, predominantly, again, the same organizations and agencies, but at different levels of responsibility, different levels of authority. And for us, like the Washington Department of Natural Resources, our MAC group person for that would be our division manager from Wildland Fire. So those are, you know, within their delegations from their agency heads. Northwest MAC mission. So again, same thing. They're just doing it at a smaller level. They're doing it at the GAC. So at Portland, the NMAC stands up and they're going to be looking at the fires in the Northwest, in Oregon and Washington. They're going to, you know, talk about strategy on how to get more resources. What can we do here? They're going to talk about, you know, resource allocation. One of the things I wanted to mention is they come up with some pretty great ideas, and so surge resources are an example of that. Instead of tying up a hotshot crew for 14 days on an incident, a fire can ask for a surge resource where maybe they just need to button up one section of a suppression line, and they just need two hotshot crews to do this work in 2 days. And their probability of success is really high. Why wouldn't you support that? Let's get this fire off the board. Let's get it contained. And then we're not tying up hotshots on a 14-day assignment where they're sitting at base camp, right? So making those resources more nimble, able to move quickly and meet that need of the incident. So that was just an example of some strategies that NMAC could use. And then there's subgeographic MAC, the subgeographic MAC participants. Again, these are the local type MAC groups, BIA, BLM. Same sort of flavor, right? Except for now we're adding in the local tribe, local fire district, local reps. This is like at the FMO type level or deputy fire staff. And I got a question. Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, yeah, Jill, back to the surge.
Yeah.
The that's basically an agreement basically between, say, two ops chiefs from two different teams, or between an ops chief and a duty officer, or to that effect. That's not, I mean, the NMAC, I assume, tracks them, right? But they're not really making the decision. That's just, I guess that's my question on that.
Yeah, Jeff could weigh in, but no, I think what you're talking about is Lend Lease. So Lend Lease we use, and we move like two ICs. We'll say, hey, can we use your hotshot crews for a shift real quick? We got this, and they can do that. I will tell you, incident business is like no. But yeah, so that's Lend Lease. Surge is definitely more. It's an order. There's an actual form. Jeff, you want to weigh in because you do these all the time.
So Surge is managed at the geographic level, and it will be comp packages, you know. So you get maybe a hotshot crew, a couple type 2 IA crews, or maybe just one and a few engines, depending on how the makeup is and what's available. And those will be divvied out or sent out based on the priorities that are set by the MAC here in the Northwest. So we go through a prioritization daily based on incident needs. And if they have a request for surge, they send that form in saying, hey, here's our need. Here's what it's going to take in the timeline. And then those surge resources would get sent to that. It is a hard thing to track because a lot of times a resource goes to an incident and they can get lost in the mix because there's a lot of things going on. So it is a little bit difficult, but I agree. I think what you were alluding to was more of a Lend Lease, and even that can be a little dicey, especially when we start talking about national resources like hotshot crews. It's kind of frowned upon because they're in such high demand and such a low as far as a quantity that are out there. Even in that case, things do happen under the radar. I would say just be open and communicate up the food chain with your agency duty officers so they're aware. And as Jill mentioned, the incident business folks, I think, pull their hair out when they hear this stuff happening because there's a lot of money associated with a crew and or aviation resources for sure. So.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So again, the subgeographic MAC mission, same thing, right? It's just at that lower level. Generally speaking, and Jeff could definitely weigh in here. I've only been at NWC really for one big assignment and watched the MAC in process, and it's super interesting. Again, how they're figuring out what they're doing, allocating resources, having those discussions on surge like Jeff mentioned. Most times the MAC group is essentially lands on Ted Pierce as the center manager at NWC, but he could probably put in that deputy, but a lot of times they'll bring in a MAC coordinator to coordinate that, and you'll see here in a bit. This is the daily schedule for the MAC group. And you can see it's a full day. Like, it is completely a full day of conference calls, situation gathering, back and forth, talking about, strategies. So again, they're up and at it, going through all these things. And then I guess in the chat, what I'd ask is, in this communication, thinking about the MAC group and the communication that's going through, what else, where else do you think that they're getting information to make these decisions? What other method are they getting other than the IC call? So they're getting an IC call at 7:30 in the morning from the at the GAC at Portland from all these ICs for CIMTs in Oregon and Washington. But how else are they getting information? Just out of curiosity, anybody knows?
Regional duty officers are an important source of information.
Okay, perfect. 209s, yes. Okay,
And Jill,
along with,
oh,
yeah, go ahead.
are they able to get into WFDS and look at information through that as well?
I suspect they could look at the, I mean, they got a full day. They could go in to look at WFDS decisions, but really, I think they're relying on those ICs to verbalize, you know, their priorities on their fire and probability of success and values at risk, those big ticket items.
Understood.
What I was going to mention is that the Northwest has and I believe all geographics do, have a GAC call. So all the dispatch centers in the morning call in, and in the fire season, in the heat of the Northwest fire season, it's every day. So they have a GAC call, they call in this communication, you know, it's like, hey, what are our critical needs? And also, what do we have available? Like, hey, we got a dispatcher available, or hey, you know, we have a strike team available. So that's where, you know, if you guys are putting things up because we're not busy, that's where that communication also goes to the GAC during those GAC calls. And same thing happens at the NIT call. So the GACs, Jeff would sit in the NIT call, and Jeff is going to, you know, let them know critical needs in the Northwest, what we're anticipating, and available resources. So again, it's kind of, they're getting that from multiple places, that status. Okay, so preparedness level definitions. We kind of heard about this in previous yesterday as well, how our preparedness levels move. And so I'm just going to talk about the Northwest preparedness level really. So that is really determined by the center manager at NWC and the MAC group. And there are some, you know, there's some triggers, right? Like there's 2 to 4 fires, and, you know, we're starting to see an uptick. There's an anticipated weather coming in. So they're deliberate decisions to move to those preparedness levels. And so at the PL3, you know, I mentioned that the neighborhood policy kind of goes out the door. There's a moderate risk. Things are starting to, you know, pick up in other areas, and we're looking at that. The resource drawdown is, you know, we're lower on our CIMT. So there's some triggers. And so they're looking at that, you know, daily, looking at our preparedness levels and making those decisions. We get into PL4 and PL5. You're looking at, you know, high risk, lots of fire on the landscape. There's a heavy commitment of resources. And then into PL5, extreme risk, lots of complexity out there, more than 14 large fires, you know, additional potential out there. What I was going to mention is for last year in 2024 at a national level, we actually set a record. It was the latest day ever at a PL5, and it ended October 17th at a PL5 in the history of it, which was interesting to me. So October 17th. I wanted to touch on how to be effective in your AA line officer role in communicating. And so this kind of shows like a circle of communication on how the MAC coordinator or how the Northwest MAC chair is actually getting information and from multiple angles. Like, you know, they're also getting the 209, they're getting the prioritization sheet, which we'll kind of talk about. And they're also getting it from through your agency administrators. So the agency duty officers going up through your IC or your agency duty officers going up to the agency administrator, they're going up to their agency MAC rep for their agency. And then similarly, the IC's going, you know, directly in the IC call, and hopefully verbalizing the same thing. You know, hey, this is the status of our fire, this is the probability of success, this is the critical needs, these are the things that we're anticipating. And so those messages are going to that MAC group from multiple pathways. Also, like individual agency administrator or line officer responsibilities, you know, big thing, issue a delegation of authority to an incident area commander. Make sure that you're in line with them on their strategies, setting up their objectives, what they're going to be, what they're going to be working with there, and leaders' intent, clear leaders' intent for those CIMTs that are coming in to help. At preparedness level 4 and 5, you know, you got to understand the likelihood of are they going to get the resources they need to do that strategy. Maybe the strategy needs to change. Maybe in a one division, you're going to move to a monitor type strategy because you're not getting the resources, you're not getting the hot shots that you need or they need to really meet those objectives. So be prepared to alter that objective and that strategy, and work with that IC so your leader's intent, you know, is met. Just a quick slide. I think I grabbed this from, I want to say it was 2020. Just 1 second here. Let me move on my notes. That might have been 16. Anyway, lots of fire. All I'm showing is like it gets very complex. And imagine sitting at Portland with all these fires in the Northwest, everybody needing hotshots, everybody needing aircraft, and trying to figure out who's getting what, really. So we're going to have a breakout. It's almost 9, our great group breakout, and I'll throw it in the chat here. At what level is it decided to allow trainees? The trainees is actually set up in generally the delegation from the agencies. So there's sometimes it's a complex fire with multiple agencies involved, and they're all part of a delegation, and they can define that we will support trainees or we can support some trainees. It really depends on the agency. There may be some the agency wants to use their own trainees in an area and get people signed off, and then also save on some costs on bringing in additional trainees. It really is from the agency administrator setting that up. Jeff, you got your hand raised.
Hey, I just wanted to make a quick point as far as resources go. When we MAC up and we're getting into these higher PL levels, and we have a lot of incidents based on prioritization, you could have a fire that's, you know, just getting after it, and has a lot of values at risk. However, it could rate lower because on the priority list, because you have a fire that you're close to catching and taking off the board. And so it may be a head scratcher for some people on like, hey, why aren't we getting the resources that we're actually asking for? But in the grand scheme of things, we're trying to get fires off the board, because one less fire out there is one less fire that's going to be asking for resources. So it's a very dynamic situation when it comes to MAC. And I will say that it is for sure 100% interagency across the board within this geographic area. And that goes all, it doesn't matter if it's ODF, Forest Service, BLM, OSFM, Oregon State Fire Marshal's office. I mean, we have all the players at the table to make these decisions, and they go into it. If they have questions, they bring it up with the coordinating group during every day's prioritization call, and they will have those discussions on why the priorities are set the way they are, and then they all agree to how it should be laid out.
Jeff, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I will hit a little bit about that at the end of my presentation because it's just, again, really, really cool. Our coordination center is, our coordination system is. So how much time in the breakouts? We're going to do, let's be back at 9:07, give you 6 minutes in your small groups. So group discussion, be back at 9:07. Okay, so from your breakout, let's go with team 5. What did you come up with?
I can go. It's Kevin. We talked about communicating like the plan when you first have a new fire, you in brief with the team and communicating the dispatch what their long range plans are, their 24, 48, 72 and beyond, and seeing if, there's some resources they're going to need, if they can start checking for availability and see, if the resources can be available to implement the plan. And also letting them know what resources we have available that could go to other GACs or other regions or whatnot, particularly when we're in our shoulder seasons.
Okay, excellent. A lot of interagency center managers are invited to, especially a CIMT and brief. That is important for that incident within an incident, cooperation, setting kind of like how our dispatch center runs, so those sort of things. Okay, team 7, thank you, Kevin. Team 7, what did you guys come up with?
One of the things we came up with, just if there's unusual events, that kind of incident with an incident that were unforeseen, whether it's like the totality, path of totality and or other recreation issues that may get involved. If we're doing the extended attack, we may need to just request some backfill resources so we can let our local resources back, especially if they've been doing long shifts. Just looking at things like work rest ratio, if we need to backfill and make sure that we're within policies like that, that's something AA would be looking at. Yeah, and just of course, just daily conversation check-in with the dispatch and the duty officer, seeing if their needs are being met before an incident management team might arrive.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. We'll go to 9, group 9.
Yeah, we had maybe something that I didn't hear yet. We kind of took it as the incident has kind of already been rolling. So we talked about establishing a location of the ICP, talking about support infrastructure, places for these things to be arriving to physically go to be able to set up and support the incident. We talked about maybe more specific medical plans, medevac sites, things like that, if they were not previously set up, and then additional expected resources, et cetera.
Okay, good. Thank you. Those are all great answers. Some things I'm going to add to that are AARs. Make sure your dispatch center is invited to the AAR. CISMs, don't forget about them. They heard what happened. So just, be cognizant of involving the dispatch center when something bad happens. Obviously, preseason meetings. Big ones are complexing fires. When the agency administrator line officers are talking about complexing fires together, man, you got to engage that dispatch center. You got to engage incident business. Sometimes, there's decisions that are made that are good decisions operationally, but create a nightmare in incident business and could really cause harm to the state in other, like for DNR. as an example, we have 4 fires, 3 of them were lightning and 1 was a negligent human caused fire. We're going to go after that one fire, that the negligent party, for cost recovery to reimburse the state for those costs. And if you complex them all together and don't have a plan to separate costs by those each individual fires, you're going to have a hard time showing those costs to that negligent party and getting reimbursed. So, you know, those decisions can affect financial packages, can you know, affect litigation, and can affect, you know, dispatch and how those things work. The other one I've had is, hey, we're going to take this fire from one dispatch center, from one complex, and move it to another dispatch center to a different complex. That's happened, and it created quite a bit of headache for the dispatch center trying to move an incident in IROC that was complex into a different center that was trying to support that other complex. And there's also like, what is your dispatch center capacity? Can they handle one more CIMT? Be thoughtful of that. They might be, you know, feeling like they're still getting IA. Can they handle what is coming out? Make sure you're checking in with them. And I guess I would leave also with, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions that you'll get more resources if you order a CIMT. And you know, be, you know, truthful in your complexity analysis on what's out there, and really try to you know, get what you need on that fire. Just because you make it ask for a CIMT does not mean that it'll be rated out as a priority fire. And Jeff kind of alluded to that. So moving on, I'm going to go to the Northwest MAC incident rating form. And this is just, you know, on the Northwest NWC website. This was 2015. We were very busy in 2015. Stick pins on there, Wolverines on there. But this is what I wanted to show. This is you don't see the paying agency. You don't see the jurisdictional agency, because the beauty of MAC and the interagency, you know, multi-agency coordination is that they don't care. They're looking at the incident based on the incident and how it rated out in priorities. And so this is the priority summary sheet from 2015. Here we have initial attack is always first priority, and that is just to keep new fires off the board from getting bigger, right? And then our next one in our priority in our GAC was Wolverine fire. And it includes the reason, the documentation on why that is our #1 priority in the GAC. So just a summary of that. Again, does not include who the paying agency is, who the jurisdictional agency is. It does not. And then here is an example of their decision with priorities and rationale. And this is from 2020, and it was October 9th. So the Northwest MAC group is still stood up, and they're still making decisions based on priorities on October 9th. And you can see it's kind of Beachy Creek is in mop up and patrol. And so these are saved. This is the Northwest MAC website. If you have a chance, look at it. It's awesome. There's a ton of stuff in here. And I'll answer your question in just a second. So in the Northwest MAC decision memo archive, you can go back and look at how decisions were made on certain fires. And where this is important is in Washington State, we have a mandate to suppress fires, right? Let's think the Carlton complex. And then we have litigation for said fire. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you get more aircraft? We can go back and show how our fire rated and priorities and what that resource drawdown was like, what resources we had available to us to suppress said fire. And, you know, we had to provide all the IROC documentation, all the UTFs. Even if something is UTF'd, unable to fill, like that dispatch center is going to create a new order, send it back up, go through the process, even knowing that it probably will be UTF'd again, because it shows that need that was still there, that's still there, that's still there. And as houses are burning, we're going to say, like, we tried, and here's the documentation of trying to get whatever. And here's the priority rating. archive. And again, I show this to, it's really based on the fire itself, and it's a holistic approach to resource allocation. And the Forest Service has no jurisdictional authority in a community, generally speaking, right? But there they are, standing up with their stuff, sending things to that fire. Doesn't matter if it's a Oregon Department of Forestry fire, or a, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. It's the fire. And how they rate that is the question is, how do you document how they prioritize? I don't know if the system documents it. We get these documentation from the GAC that says these are your priority fires. And so we know what we're doing. Locally, if there's a local draw on our local, we will stand up a local group, local MAC group, sometimes referred to LMAC. And those would be like the FMOs or the deputy fire staff. And they're coming in from all their agencies with their authorities and making those decisions, again, in an interagency cooperative, like where are our priorities within our dispatch center boundary. And then yeah, just 1 second. The form is a IPW 2100, and it's called an incident prioritization worksheet. So the ICs for the typed fires are going to fill that out the night before at 2100 and send that in. That's how they're getting this information. Does that help? Or situation unit leader. Thank you, Mike. Yes.
So with the prioritization, it ends up being, we use the IPWs, the IC call in the morning, and then the 209s. 209s are critical. So if you have an incident out there, IPWs need to be done when we have teams in place, right? But when we have national resources attached to any incident, we have to have a 209 done for one. That's a mandate. And the 209s, if you can't show that you have critical resource needs on 209s, those are legal documents. And we could say, well, look, the 209 came in and there's no critical needs for this fire, and we know it's chewing up homes over here. So really emphasizing that to your incidents, to your duty officers, that, hey, 209's got to be put in. And a lot of times that can even be pushed back onto the dispatch system, unfortunately. And they have a lot going on, but they are critical in allocation of resources. As far as what Jill was saying, said fire comes back with litigation down the road, they will FOIA these 209s, and we could be like, well, we didn't give them a hotshot crew or air tankers that day because they said they didn't have any critical needs.
Thank you, Jeff. So my last little bit, I'm almost done here. I have a couple of videos, and Megan's putting them in the portal, or put them in the portal as they're YouTube links. One of them is an introduction to a 3-tier dispatch center system, and that it's 11 minutes. It's a little bit older, but man, it is spot on. It's a great video. I'd encourage you to watch that. And then the other video is the National Multi-Agency Coordinating Group virtual tour. It's 3 minutes and 43 seconds, but it's so much information in there, and really some really good reference videos for you all when you have extra time. Any questions for me? Excellent. All right, I'll turn it back over to James. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. And I just want to, emphasize the importance of dispatch, keeping your dispatchers in the loop, and really encourage FMOs and AAs to build that relationship, or at least awareness and friendships, right, with dispatch centers. Critical part of the whole process, not just for initial attack and not just for talking to them on the radio. So thanks, Jill, for all of that. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. per the schedule, and we'll come back at let's call it 32. So 9:32. I'll put that in the text. Thanks again, Jill.
Thank you.